Okay, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Steve Heaney, and today I'm going to show you how you can use Zenphi to optimize the use of your Google Workspace licenses. So what exactly does that mean? Well, in today's workplace, we often have employees and contractors coming and going, and it's really easy to lose track of Google Workspace accounts that have been created. This not only presents a security risk, but it costs you money too, because every month you're paying for those Google Workspace licenses for those dormant user accounts. We might have processes in place to disable an account when someone leaves the organization, but often this is where the process ends. And over time, all of those disabled accounts, which are still costing you a license, they start to add up. Using Zenphi, we can create an automated process to identify these dormant accounts and request further instructions from the user's manager on what to do with those accounts and how we can go about saving on those license fees. From there, we could suspend, archive, and delete those accounts if they're no longer required. Having an automated process for managing your Google Workspace user accounts has a number of advantages. From a security perspective, identifying and removing access to former staff and contractors is paramount. Making sure they no longer have access to your systems after they've left the organization. Ideally this would occur as part of an offboarding process, but with contract staff, it's not always obvious when their employment is finished. Archiving and or deleting unnecessary accounts can save you a lot of money as well. Depending on the SKU of Google Workspace that your organization is using, this could cost as much as $30 per user per month. So making sure that we've got the right number of user accounts and we're only enabled those that we absolutely need is going to save you a lot of money. And finally, by automating this process, it takes a lot of stress off the IT team. It improves accuracy, and it means that your IT team can focus on more important projects. Automating this process with Zenphi can take literally a matter of minutes. You basically set it up, schedule it to run on a regular basis, and away you go. Hopefully everyone on today's call is familiar with Zenphi, but for those of you who are not, Zenphi is a no-code automation platform that has been designed specifically for Google Workspace, and it runs in the Google Cloud. It has seamless integration with all the Workspace apps such as Sheets, Docs, Forms, and it makes automating processes involving these applications really easy. Zenphi also has integrations with other popular CRM systems, digital signing platforms, and other line of business systems to make end-to-end process automation as easy as just dragging and dropping the different actions from the toolbox in your web browser. Zenphi can be used to automate a wide range of business processes, including expense approvals, quote generation, HR onboarding, quality processes, a whole gamut of IT processes. Pretty much any process you can draw as a flowchart, you can automate with Zenphi. And this brings me to today's task, and that is identifying unnecessary Google Workspace user licenses and automatically taking action on these accounts. We'll break this up into two parts. In the first phase, I'll use Zenphi to create a report of inactive user accounts, and I'll put this into a Google Sheet and we'll send it through to IT for review. In the second part, we'll take that a step further and we will identify who the line managers are for these inactive accounts. We will send a review task to them and seek further instructions. We'll basically ask the managers whether we should archive, delete, or suspend these user accounts. Looking at this process as a flowchart, every 2 weeks we want to go and query the Google directory and find users who haven't logged in for more than, say, 60 days. Of course, that would be configurable for your needs, but in this example, we're going to use 60 days as the limit. Once we find those users, we want to take those results and we want to populate a Google Sheet and then finally send that through to IT via email. And then repeat this process every 2 weeks. So let's jump straight in and see how we can build out this automation using Zenphi. Okay, so here we are inside of my Zenphi workspace, and the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a flow. Now, because we want this flow to run every 2 weeks, this flow is actually going to be triggered by a timer. So I'm going to click on this scheduled flow trigger here, and this will take me to the designer. The first thing I'm going to do here is configure this trigger. So I'm going to say, let's start this next Sunday, and I want this to run every 2 weeks. Okay, so now my trigger is taken care of, and this flow will now run every 2 weeks. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and search my directory for users. Drag on this search users action here, and it's asking for a connection to my Google directory, and I've done that with my admin one there. Or if you needed to create one, you could go ahead and do that there as well. You can see here that if I wanted to, I could filter down my user query by domain or manager or organization. And at most, this is going to be returning 500 results. So if I have more users in my organization than 500, I'm going to need to use paging to go through and make sure I get all of the users. So let's go ahead and set that up now. First thing I'm going to do is create a workflow variable for that next page token. So we'll call this page token, and this will be of type string. Go ahead and save that. And what I'm going to need to do is place this search user action into a loop. So I'll go ahead and drag on a loop, and we'll say, let's just run this, say 100 times. If I had more than 50,000 users, I could increase that if I needed to. And I'll drag that up into there. And this time, what I'm going to say is the page token, go ahead and use that variable that we just created earlier. Now, after it's done the search, if there is another page to go and query for, that page token is going to be set inside of this search users action of one of the outputs. So I need to drag on an if statement here, and I'm going to say if the condition will be when the search user action next page token is null, that means that we're finished, there are no more pages, and that's the end of the loop. So I'll say if no more pages, and what we want to do in that scenario is follow this true branch, and we're actually going to break out of that loop. So I'll drag on the break loop action, and that'll be the end of our query. Selecting the loop there. And that's done. However, if there are more pages, we need to go ahead and set that next page token variable that we created. So the next time this runs around, it's going to start from the correct page. The variable will be page token, and the value will be the next page token from this loop. Okay, so now it's going to run through and run this search users as many times as it needs to get all of the users out of my directory. But I'm not just interested in all of the users. What I'm really interested in doing is filtering this down and looking at the inactive users only. And the way I'm going to do that is by looking at the last login time of each of the users and comparing that to 60 days ago. So I'll start by dragging on a date and time, a current date time action. Put this outside the loop. This is just going to be used for getting our start time. Now I'm also going to use this in the file name of the report that I create. So I'll give this a nice format as well. Year, month, day, day. And what I really need to do is I need to subtract 60 days from the current date to work out my, my filter point. So the date here that I'm using is the result of that date time. And I want to subtract 60 days from there. Okay. So whenever I'm doing a search for the users, what I really need to do now is query that collection of users that I get back. Drag on a query collection. And the collection that I'm going to be querying is the results of that search users. But this time I'm going to be filtering it, and I'm saying only bring back the results where the last login time is less than the date that we calculated just a second ago. Okay, and we're interested in getting all of the items that match that criteria. So now I've got my subset of users that haven't logged in for a long time, and I want to go ahead and store those into a Google Sheet. So the first thing I need to do is create a new Google Sheet for this report. And from my toolbox, I can see here I've got all the Google Sheet actions here. And what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is create a new spreadsheet. Now it's asking whereabouts I want to put it. So I'll just browse to my drive and yep, in the reports folder looks good. The file name, I'll call this inactive users, and I'm also going to append to that the formatted date time that we set up earlier, and that'll be the name of my spreadsheet. Now I need to add a header row to that sheet for all the results. So I'll just drag on an add row. And the spreadsheet where we're going to be adding that row to is going to be the file ID of the spreadsheet we just created. Sheet name will be sheet 1. I can go ahead now and populate the values that I want to put in for my header. So we will be storing the user email. We'll be storing their last login time. Whether or not the account is suspended. Whether or not it's archived. And we'll also store the manager's email address. Okay, so now I've created my sheet, I've added a header row. Now I can go ahead and for each of those inactive users, go ahead and add them to that sheet. So for that, I'm going to need another for each loop, and I'll drag that on. And I'm saying for each item in that collection, we want to go ahead and add a row to the spreadsheet. Again, the file ID is going to be the file that I created earlier, sheet name, sheet 1. And now I can go ahead and put my values in. So in column A, we had the user's email. Column B, we had the last login time. So put that in there. Column C was whether or not they were suspended. Column D, we had whether or not they were archived. And column E was the manager's email. But you'll see here, I don't currently have that on this particular item. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and query for the user's manager. And the way I can do that is back in my Google Directory actions, I have got a lookup manager action I can drag on. So I'll put that in there. And I'm looking up that user's manager. So now I've got a value for the manager. I can get back into my add row and finish off column E. I'll put the manager's email address in there. Okay, so now I'm running through. I've populated my report. I've put in all the rows. The last thing we need to do is go ahead and send that through to IT. And I'm going to do that by using send email. Drag that on at the end. Configure this one. So this is where you put in the IT contact who you want to send it to. In this case, I'm just going to put it into admin at zenphi.cloud. All this inactive users. Please review the inactive user report below. And in here, we could add a link, a view link to the spreadsheet report that we created. Okay, so I'll give this flow a name. And I can save this. And this flow is now ready to test. So I'll hit the test run button. And we'll watch our report be generated. So you can see here it's executing. Here are the steps that are currently happening. Creating the spreadsheet, doing the search of the directory, found some inactive users, we're adding some rows, we've ended the loop, we've sent the email, and the flow is now completed. So let's take a look in my inbox now, and I should have a report here that I can click on, and here is the data that I've retrieved from the directory. This is showing me inactive users, and these particular accounts looks like they've never logged in. The last login dates back in 1970. But there you go. Pretty quickly, we're able to build that flow, generate the report, and send it through to IT. So now that we've identified all of those inactive user accounts, let's take this automation to the next step. For each inactive account, we want to assign a task to the user's line manager and ask them, what should we do with this account? Depending on their response, we'll either do nothing, we'll suspend access, archive the account, or delete it. By suspending the account, we are basically just removing the user's access to log in. It won't free up a license, and all the user's data will still be there, and the suspension can be removed at any time, but it is removing access from a security point of view in case that user no longer needs access. By archiving the account, a Google Workspace archive user license is assigned in place of their normal Workspace license. It'll remove the user's access and it'll remove them from the Google directory, but it'll retain the data for compliance purposes. So if you are using Google Vault, you can still access all the data from there, and all the retention rules are followed as well. The archive licenses are also typically charged at a much lower rate than the normal Google Workspace license. And finally, you could delete the account, and I'll show you how we can do this with Zenphi quite easily. But I won't go into it today, but one thing you may need to be aware of is that if you delete the user account, you're also going to be deleting all of the data that's stored inside of Google Workspace for that user account as well. So if you do need to keep the data for retention purposes, please be mindful of that, and you may want to go in and export the user's drive data or their emails before you go ahead and delete the account. Even data that was in the Google Vault for an account that gets deleted will also be removed, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let's jump in and automate step 2. Okay, so back into the Workflow Designer again, and what we're going to do now is scroll to the bottom of this flow. We'll leave all of that stuff in place. So we're notifying IT, that can all stay. But what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and read that data back in from that report. And the way we can do that is by dragging on a read rows action from Google Sheets. And the file we're going to be reading is the file that we created at the start. Sheet name is sheet 1. We want to return all the rows from the sheet. And we can actually go ahead and tell it what the column names are here. So we had the user email in there. Column B, we had the last login time. C was the is suspended. And I'm just giving these nice names, and you'll see why in a second, but this will make designing the rest of the flow quite a bit easier. It's archived. And manager's email. Okay, so because I've named these columns, I'm basically telling Zenphi what the spreadsheet looks like. And when I look at the output, what I'm going to be getting here is I'm getting all these nicely typed reference things that I can use later on in the flow. So now that we've read all those rows back into a collection, what we need to do now is we need to do a for each and basically go through that collection of inactive users. But instead of using the standard for each, which does them one at a time, I'm going to use a very clever operation that we have here, which is parallel for each. And what that's going to do is it's going to fork off a number of different processes and basically execute all of these in parallel for that entire collection. So what we'll do here is we'll select the collection that we're interested in, which is all these rows. And what we're going to be doing is for each of those inactive users, we're going to assign a task to the user's manager to find out what we need to do next. So in the task name, I'll call this review inactive user. Spell that correctly. Okay, and the possible outcomes that they could have, we're basically going to say they could archive the user, they could suspend the user, delete the user, or do nothing. And we're going to be assigning this to the user's manager. So I'll go through, and because we named all of those cells earlier, I can see here we've got the manager's email, that's who we're assigning it to. And the subject will be, please review inactive account. And I can populate the body here. Following user has been inactive for more than 60 days. Please let us know what to do. And I can put in the user here. I can put in their last login date. Whether or not they're suspended, archived. And there we go. So we're setting up this task to send through to their manager. Now, once they respond to the task, we need to take action. So what I can do here is I can drag on a switch by value, and the value that we're going to be switching on is basically the outcome of that task we just sent through. And on branch A, we'll have, if the result is archive. Branch B can be suspend. We'll have another one for delete. And finally, we'll have I'll have the do nothing. And the default branch can be the do nothing. Okay, so if the manager has elected to archive this account, what we need to do is go back into the Google directory and drag on a suspend user action. And the user that we're going to be archiving is going to be the user's email. And I just changed this to yes, and that's going to go ahead and archive that user. And I'll rename this to archive user. If we're going to suspend, we'll drag on the suspend user. This time we're going to be saying suspend yes. Again, the user is the user we selected from the collection. For delete account, we actually have an action here for delete user, so I can drag that on. The user we're deleting is this guy here. And I'm just going to clean up these two branches that I've got here. So I don't need that one. There we go. Do nothing, we do nothing. And then that's the end of the flow. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll give it a test run. And this time we should get, the manager should get an email requesting what to do with these inactive users. So you can see here it's running through the steps. Sent the email, and you can see here we've assigned 3 tasks for 3 inactive users that we've discovered. If I jump back into my inbox, I'm actually set up as the manager for these accounts. So I've got the new report. We've got a task here, and it's saying this particular user, Steve at Zenphi.cloud, last login then, suspended, archive. What would you want me to do? Let's go ahead and archive this user. Now, just before I do that, I just wanted to show you the Google directory here. So this is the directory that I'm using. And I just put in my password there. So this is the Google directory we're using, and I can see I've got my users here, and this is the user we're talking about. If I click through here and look at the licenses that are currently in use, I can see we're currently using a Google Business license. So let's go ahead and respond to this task, and we're going to say archive this user. Got the response. If I jump back into the flow and see what's happening here, this task has been completed. We've gone ahead and archived that user. So if I jump back into my Google directory now, do a refresh on this page, we can see that we've now freed up that Business Plus license, and we've now assigned an archive user license instead. Jumping back into the slides, in summing up, what we've learned today is how we can quickly turn a process flowchart into an automated process using Zenphi. We've used the Google directory to search for and identify inactive user accounts. We've created a Google Sheet and populated it with the report results. We've used Zenphi tasks to assign review tasks to managers, and we've been able to suspend, archive, and delete user accounts. So with that, I'm going to hand over now to any questions. Let's have a look what we've got here. Can Zenphi export a user's data before deleting it? That's a great question. And while we can't do this right now, what we have got in development some actions that are going to work against Google Vault. So this will essentially allow you to export a specific user's data from the Vault, similar how you can do it in the Google Vault interface. And if you're not using Vault, you could use Zenphi to, reset the account password, and then maybe send that to the manager and allow them to go and access all the data from that account, get what they need before deleting it. Okay, if we start working with your platform, are you able to provide training to our team? Absolutely. So we have a customer success team that helps out all new customers in getting up and running with Zenphi and automating their first flow. We have lots of, so another question here around resources. There are a lot of resources on our website, links to recordings, webinars. We've got discuss at zenphi.com being our community forum. And of course, you can just contact us at support@zenphi.com and we'll help you out as well. Okay, we're just about out of time, so I think we'll call it there. For all those other questions, we'll get back to you on email. But I'd like to thank everybody for their time today, and I hope you got something out of this webinar, and hope to see you soon on the Zenphi platform. Thank you.